So what are Python loops? There are two primitive loop commands. With the while loop, you can execute a set of statements as long as the condition is true. For example, I equals 6. While I is less than 6, print I plus equals 1. You know, I gave you something like this in the previous class when I was explaining Boolean operators to you. Good. So remember to indent your I, or your loop will continue forever. That's what they are saying here. If you remember that same last class, I had to crop out some part of my videos because the thing was doing it over and over and my system was freezing. That's because I forgot to add increments to my loop. So now there's also a break statement. You see, the break statement is used to stop the loop even if the command is true. For example, they said I equals 1 while I is less than 6, print I. If I equals 3, break, then I plus equals 1. So they said I is equals to 1 here. Then when I is less than 6, you should print I, meaning it will keep printing I so far I is less than 6. And at the end here, it also said I plus, that's your increment. So if I is now equals to 3, it will automatically stop the code because you give it another condition. So let's see. If you check down the terminal here, it only printed 1, 2, 3 and not to 6. Right? So now if I were to remove this code that says if I equals 3, break, you see it will print 1 to 6 instead of 1 to 3. So now let's just save this, then I'll run it. Can you see? Okay, 1 to 5 instead of 1. Can you see? So now that's about for your break. Now let's go to our continue statement. The continue statement, with it you can stop the current iteration and continue with the rest. For example, they said if I is equals to 0 while I is less than 6, I plus plus, that's your increment as usual. So they said if I is equals 3, continue, meaning it will move to the next iteration if I is equals to 3. For example, let me run that so you can see it. Can you see? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Do you know why it showed 1, 2, 4, 5, 6? This continue is more like a skip statement to it, meaning when I is equals to 3, it won't bother to print it. It will just go to the next iteration, meaning it will ignore the next command after that and just move to the next iteration. So that's the function of the continue statement. So now let's go to the else statement. Now they said print a message once the condition is false, meaning I equals 1, that's our variable I. Then while I is less than 6, print I equals plus equals 1, that's our increment. So else print I is no longer less than 6. So they said while I is less, okay, so what they are trying to do here is, you know, so far I is less than 6, it will keep printing 1, 2, 3 till I is equals to 6. Once I is equals to 6, that's I is not less than 6 again, it will print I is no longer less than 6, meaning once the condition is broken, you know our condition here says less than 6, but as soon as it's equals to 6 or higher than 6, it will break. So now So now we are going to go to the for loops. So they said a for loop is used for iterating over a sequence that is either a list, tuple, dictionary, a set, or a string. This is less like the for keyword in other programming language and works more like an iterator method as found in other object-oriented programming language. So they said with the for loop, you can execute a set of statements once for each item in a list tuple set. So what they are trying to say is, for every item in that list, it will bring them out, meaning it will select them one after the other and apply your code to it. So now they said for x in fruit, print x. You know, in the last class I told you for your list is like a variable containing multiple values. So now they said fruits, for our fruits are apple, banana, and cherry. So for x in fruits, print x, meaning it will list out everything in our list one after the other. So let's see. Can you see? Apple, banana, and cherry. It's printed, it's below. So now they said the for loop does not require an indexing variable to set beforehand. So they said we can also loop through a string. For x in banana, print x, meaning it will print BANANA like that, one after the other. So now you already know the break statements. I've explained the break statements in the other one. So now the continue statements, as I told you last time, it will skip the current value and move to the next one. So the range function, to loop through a set of code a specified number of times, we can use the range function. For x in range 6, print x. So the range function, they said it returns a sequence of numbers starting from 0 by default and increments by 1 by default and ends at the specified number. So for x in range 6, you print x. So now you see, as we run that, it started from 0 to 5. Can you see? So now they said you should note the range 6 is not the value 0 to 6 but values of 0 to 5. So now the range function, they said it defaults the statement sequence by 1. However, it's possible to specify the increment value by adding a third parameter. So I'm coming on. Okay, I skipped this. So they said the range function defaults and starts from 0. However, it is possible to start the value by adding a parameter. You know, normally it started counting from 0, but if you say 2 to 6, that means it will print 3, 4, 5. That's the three numbers in between 2 and 6, instead of just printing from 0 counting to 6. So now they said you can also add the increment value you want. You know, normally it will increment by 1, but you can make it increment by adding a third value. So can you see? The default increment sequence is 1, but here now if you were to run this, instead of it to increment by 1, it will increment by 3. So can you see? 2, 5, 8. Can you see? So that's how it is. That's 2 plus 3, 5 plus 3, 8 plus 3, 11 plus 3, like that till it got to 29. So now they said else in Word it is used to specify a block of code to be executed when the loop is finished. So they said, example, print all numbers from 0 to 5 and print a message when the loop has ended. So you already know this. Once it prints from 1 to 5, it will automatically print finally finished. So now they said break the loop when x is 3 and see what happens with the else block. Actually, if you do this, let me see. So you see it didn't run the code finally finished because the condition has not been met. You know what it said here is for x in range 6. That's our condition. That means if it has passed x, that means x is equals to 6. Automatically to print finally at x equals to 5, it will print finally finished. But since we broke it in the middle and x was equals to 3 at the moment, it won't run that last code. So that's why it didn't print finally finished. So now they said nested loops. They said a nested loop is a loop inside a loop. The inner loop will be executed one time for each iteration of the outer loop. So they said this is our first list, this is our second list. So they said for x in adjective, for y in fruit, print x, y. So do you know what it will do here? It will say red apple, big banana, tasty cherry. Meaning for every element it picks in the first list, it will pick another one in the second, like that. It will be taking them one after the other from different. So now sorry, I didn't copy the whole thing. So can you see? Red apple, red banana, red, like that, like that. So now the past statements. So they said for loops cannot be empty, but if you for some reason have a for loop with no content, put in the past statement. Past statement is more like ignore it, just to ignore. So let's go to the next topic. Now they said functions in Python. A function in Python is a block of code that can be called and repeated multiple times. You know, instead of you putting print name, that means you are printing the variable of name, writing it every time in your code. You could just declare a function with the value print name. So anytime you want to run that print name, you just call your function. So now they said to create a function, this is how you define it. Def. So for example, now I'm going to define a function named def example. So now this is my function here. So now they said the value of our function is print. Then let's say our own is to print a variable name. So I'll do this. Let me see. Okay, I said to print a variable name, Abi. So name. Note though, you must always declare your variable before you actually call it. If not, Python will output an error. So let's go back up and declare our variable name. So name is equals to, let's see, Tolu. So now this is how you declare your function and the code of the function. After declaring the function, which is this def example, that's the name of my function. Example is the name of my function. So this is the code that is in the function. Print name, which is a variable I declared previously. So now they said calling a function. So they said to call a function, you use the function name followed by parentheses, that's your brackets. So now for example, let's say let me see, I say example. So can you see, I called the function here, example, with the brackets. That's how to call a function. So as soon as I run the code, so output, it will automatically output Tolu, which is the variable that I declared earlier. So
what you define the Python function again? Define the Python function.
This is it here. I told you, example, the name, that's the name of your function, then this parenthesis, that's your brackets. That's how to define the function. I mean to call the function actually, not define the function. To define the function, you just put def, that's def, the name of your function, then you put the code of your function there.
No, not our type of define, like define or writing the meaning of Python function.
I can't do that for now, I'm recording. So they said arguments. Information can be passed into functions as arguments. Arguments are specified after the function name inside parentheses. So you can add as many arguments as you want, just separate them with comma. For example, they said the example below has a function with one argument named fname. When the function is called, we pass along a first name which is used inside the function to print the full name. So they said print fname equals reference, and they've also passed the argument in the function there. So they said my function, okay, so this automatically will fill in the values defined after. For example, let's can you see? So what it did, they said they declared, they passed an argument which is fname, and they said print fname plus this. So they now said my function again, they now put this value. Automatically these values are passed to this argument. So automatically it knows that okay, since they've passed the argument and they've already given me the values again, it will automatically run this, that's print the argument and this other one here. So that's what it did there. That's why you have this output below. So they said arguments are often shortened to args in Python documentation. So they said parameter or arguments. The terms parameter and arguments can be used for the same thing. Informations are passed into a function. From a function perspective, a parameter is the variable listed inside the parentheses in the function definition, while the argument is the value that is sent to the function when it's called. So they said number of arguments. By default, a function must be called with the correct number of arguments, meaning if your function expects 2 arguments, you have to call 2 arguments, not more or less, or else Python will output error. So as you can see, what they did here is similar to what we did above. The only difference is there are 2 arguments. The first argument is f name and the second one is l name. So they said my function and they passed the value of the argument. So the value for the first argument, f name, is mu, then the second one is refness. So by the time you run this code, it will output mil, then it will space it and put refness there. So let me do that so you can see it. Can you see the first name and it's printed them together? So now if you try to call the function with 1 or 3 arguments, you get an error, meaning you must always call a function that is exactly the number of functions you defined. It must not be more, it must not be less. So now they said arbitrary arguments, that's args. If you don't know how many arguments that will be passed to your function, add an asterisk before the parameter name in the function. So this way the function will receive a tuple of arguments and can access them accordingly. For example, they said the number of arguments is unknown. Add an asterisk before the parameter name, which they did here. That's the name of your arguments. They added asterisk before the kids. So they now said print the youngest child is kids 2. So automatically, in our list and in our set and the likes, you count from 0. So instead of 1, you count from 0. That's 0, 1, 2. So now if you run this, can you see? The youngest child is Linus. You know why it outputs Linus? Because you don't count from 1, you count from 0. You say 0, 1, then 2. This is 2 here.
Let me change the bracket and put 1. Which put 2 here?
Yes. So now they said keyword arguments. You can also send arguments with the key equals value syntax. So the way or the order of arguments does not matter. So for example, it's just like declaring a variable and using it to send the arguments. For example, they declared 3 arguments. They said child 3, child 2, child 1. So they now said the youngest child is plus 3. That's child plus 3. So they now declared here, that's they are passing the arguments, but instead of them to just pass the arguments normally in order, they now declared variables for each argument. So they said child 1 Emil, child 2 equals Tobias, and the third one Linus. So automatically they call the third one here, so the output will be Linus. So they said argument keyword quags. If you don't know how many keyword arguments that will be passed to your function, you use 2 asterisks. You know the other one, it was 1, now you use 2. This way you can receive a dictionary of arguments and access the items accordingly. So this is our dictionary here. So his last name is kid, then L name, automatically to print this. In our dictionary you have the properties, and each property will have its value. So for L name, the property L name, the value is refness. So automatically if they say, if you print kid L name, it will automatically say his last name is reference. So they said arbitrary keywords arguments are often shortened to quags in Python documentation. I already know that. So they said default parameter value. The following example shows how to use a default parameter value. If we call the function without argument, it uses the default value. For example, they said def. The name of the function is my underscore function. So they said country equals Norway. Print, I am from country. So they now said, they said my function, they passed the arguments again. Sweden, India, dash, and Brazil. Automatically, it will still put this there because they've declared it already. So, see. Can you see? It did everything. That's Sweden, India, Norway. The third one we didn't declare it, so automatically it moved that value to the third one that you didn't declare. So they said you can pass a list as an argument. This is similar to what we did the other time. So they said def my food. For x in food, print x. Fruit equals blah 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 blah. So can you see apple, banana, and cherry? Our function name here is food. They now say for x in food, print x. And they also said fruit equals apple, banana, and cherry. So you are just passing this list to the function automatically to pick the value. That means it will iterate on them one after the other. So to let a value function return a value, you use return statement. So return now it's similar to print, but you use it to return specific values. So for example, now they said def my function. They are defining the function. The name of the function is my underscore function. So they now gave it an argument x. So they now said return 5 times x. Then they printed my function 359. So what it will do is 5 times 3, 5 times 5 times 3, 5 times 5, and 5 times 9. Then it will output the values. For example, can you see 5 times 3, 5 times 5, 5 times 9. So now they said pass statement. Function definitions cannot be empty, but if you for no reason have a function definition with no content, put the pass statement to avoid getting an error. We've done this before. Pass statement is more like an ignore statement, just to tell it to leave it and ignore it because you defined. So now they said recursion. Python also accepts function recursion, which means a defined function can call itself. Recursion is a common mathematical and programming concept. It means a function calls itself. This has the benefit of meaning that you can look through data to reach a result. So it's just like, for example, now you tell your friend, I'm coming to your house and I will get there by 5 o'clock. Then your friend now says, okay. You now sent another message saying, if I don't get there by 5 o'clock, read the message again. You understand? Meaning you are telling him to go back. If he doesn't see you by 5 o'clock, he will read it again. If he doesn't see you again, he will read it again, like that. So they said the developer should be careful with recursion, as it can be very easy to slip into writing a function which never terminates. That's infinite loop, and your system will get crashed from that. So this is an example of recursion here. So they define the function try recursion, then the argument k. So they say if k is greater than 0, result equals k plus try recursion k minus 1, print result. Else result equals 0, return result. So for example now, sorry, move back there. Let me copy it and run it. Can you see? 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, 21. So that will be all for today. Then if you have any issues, you can refer to W3 Schools again, or you just ask me on WhatsApp.
Okay.